Our panel, Bill Kristol, the Weekly Standard editor, Rich Benjamin, senior fellow at Demos, and Jonas Ferris, editor and founder of MaxFunds.com. Jonas, I'm going to start with you. I thought this was getting a bit better. Apparently not. One of the questions I have tonight as I look at these new downgrades, what is this going to mean for consumers, for individual investors who might be borrowing money from these institutions?
Well, you can't complain as a borrower right now. All this panic and fear in the market is driving rates down, which if you borrow money, it's the best times ever to borrow. People actually don't want to borrow as much as they used to. A few years ago, that's one of the reasons the economy is slow, is people don't have that desire to just take on debt and consume. They're not buying cars at the rates, the peaks they used to, homes, just about anything, even though rates are lower than they were when they were peaking. So as far as the actual specific thing we were just talking about, last time there was a panic in money market funds with commercial paper, the government stepped in and basically turned them into FDIC-type products temporarily. I would imagine they would do that again. It's basically costless. They made a little money off it. It stops runs on money market funds, on commercial paper-type investment vehicles. So
are we in danger of that now?
I don't think we are, and I think they would do that very quickly because it worked so well last time.
Wow. Well, that's a headline for sure. Bill, let's go to you for a second. We've had a lot of bad news today. This is just the latest. And, of course, we were talking earlier today about bad news on the economic front. Industrial production that's down to 11-month lows. You know, as you look at what's going on in the political arena, a lot of people now saying there's no way this economy is going to gain any momentum through November. What do you say, and how will that affect voters?
I mean, obviously, a bad economy is not good for the incumbent president. People expected, and President Obama promised a more robust recovery, and we haven't had it. But I think, honestly, it would be a mistake for Mitt Romney to simply sit back and say, the news is going to be so bad, I can just sort of say nothing, and people will just vote out President Obama. President Obama will say, and he will be saying the truth, that he inherited a really terrible situation, that even though it's been a very slow recovery, there has been some recovery, and he will accuse Mitt Romney of just wanting to take us back to the bad old days of the financial crisis and the like. So I think Mitt Romney needs a forward-looking agenda. He needs to explain that he is going to be able to get growth going with the right policies, and I think he can do that, honestly. But I'd say there's a little tendency in Romney land to think, well, you know, we can just sort of not take any risks. The news will be so bad across the board that we don't even have to say much. But I don't know, in Virginia, a swing state, which I live in, 5.6% unemployment. Iowa, a swing state, 5.1% unemployment. I'm not sure you can just go to Virginia and Iowa and say, hey, look around, it's the Depression, vote out the incumbent. I think you need to have a pro-growth agenda.
Need a pro-growth agenda. And, Rich, to you, as you look at this, I mean, a lot of people are saying that we need some kind of dramatic action out of the Fed, but you saw the Fed yesterday. They made a little move, but not much. What's your take, your read on what's going on with the economy?
Well, I would agree with Bill in the sense that he should give that advice not to just Mitt Romney, but to the Republican-led Congress. Their approval ratings are just 18%, and there's a frustration. There's a sense that the worse the numbers go, the better Congress can sit on the ball and also do nothing. So that advice should go to Mitt Romney. It should go to the Republican Congress. But, Jerry, I'll also quickly point out that ironically, a majority of Americans in a recent CBS New York Times poll said they're better off today than they were 4 years ago.
And whose poll was that?
Whose fault?
Whose poll?
That's the CBS New York Times.
All right, well, that's interesting. Bill Kristol, do you think the American people believes right now that they're better off than they were 4 years ago?
I think it probably depends, whether you've kept your job and whether you were invested in the stock market at the bottom and have had a little bit of a rebound. But I think it's mixed. Honestly, it's a mixed verdict. Look, I'm a critic of President Obama's policies. I'm a critic of the Fed policies. I think we could have done a lot better, and I hope Mitt Romney wins, and I think he can do a lot better. But my only point is I do think and I think a lot of people are just unhappy with President Obama. And if things continue to go badly for the next few months, Mitt Romney could win the presidency simply by saying, gee, President Obama, his policies just haven't worked. But I would be more comfortable both politically and just substantively with Governor Romney laying out an aggressive pro-growth agenda, and I think really making the case, which I believe, that we could have kind of a boom in the next year or two if we fix our regulatory policies, have sensible tax reform, convince the markets that we have entitlements at least under control. I think there's an awful lot of pent-up capital, both physical and mental capital, in a sense, here in the U.S. Europe's problems are bad for us, but they're also also good for us, though, because, capital wants to come here, interest rates will stay low. So I think Mitt Romney could do more to really say, hey, look, if we can get sensible policies in place, there's no new normal here of 1.5% growth. We can really have a healthy economy.
Jonas, does Europe's troubles help us or hurt us?
Until they spill over and really cause problems here, they're not going to hurt. They have to, right now, if they had an election over there, you see how their elections are turning where people are voting for different people. It hasn't hit here yet, and it probably won't, but if it gets worse over there and you keep seeing slow growth here because of the drag from exports, whatever, then it will change people's behavior. But right now, the average person doesn't really feel the problems in Europe as much as Europeans certainly do.
All right, guys. Bill, Rich, and Jonas, stick around. We're going to talk to you again after the break. But first, with the bad news piling up all day, sending stocks sharply lower, there were a few bright spots. The price of oil falling nearly $3 today, dipping below $80 for the first time since October. The drop in oil, of course, made gas cheaper this summer. The price at the pump fell to a national average of $3.47 a gallon. That is down 46 cents from its peak in April. Also today, more reason for you homeowners out there to refinance. We were talking about this earlier. The average rate on a 30-year fixed mortgage fell this week to a record low for the 7th time in 8 weeks. All good news, my friends. It is now at 3.66%, down from 3.71% last week, and the lowest since long-term mortgages began in the 1950s. The rate on the 30-year loan has been below 4% since December. Opportunity. That's what that is. The average rate on the 15-year mortgage also declined to 2.95%, just above the record 2.94% reached 2 weeks ago. Next, our panel weighs in on a blockbuster ruling from the Supreme Court on the power of unions. And coming up at the bottom of the hour, regulators wanting to get more involved in money market mutual funds. Find out what it means for your investments. All right, let's get back to our panel. Bill Kristol of the Weekly Standard, Rich Benjamin with Demos, and Jonas Ferris from MaxFunds.com. Welcome back, all. Let's talk about SCOTUS, the Supreme Court, for just a second, if we could. You okay there?
Yeah.
Okay. We almost lost a guest. We're back. Okay. SCOTUS had some things to say about unions, and basically saying that, you can't use the fees that you pay as a union member for bankrolling candidates, that individual union members should have some kind of voice in this. And Rich, I'm going to go to you on this because I know you've spent a lot of time thinking about this.
I do. I think it's a horrible decision in the sense that the Roberts Court is accumulating power for corporations. We saw that with the Walmart decision. We saw that with Citizens United. And so how do ordinary people, nurses, firemen, teachers, cops, have a voice in this political system? And now,
by voting?
All of this is getting cut back. But it's not just enough to vote. We see billionaires, Shadle Ellis and all these people participating at these big rates. But so how do you accumulate your voice? Who's going to stand up for them?
All right, Bill, what do you say about this decision from the Supreme Court?
I'm not an expert on the legal side of it, but as a matter of fairness, it seems to me people should voluntarily contribute to common causes and to union political funds if they want to. But the idea that everyone has to pay dues, which then get used for political races where not everyone agrees on who to support or on what the right stance on an issue is, I think it's fairer to let people make their own choices.
Jonas, should union dues go to political campaigns?
Oh, they shouldn't, but neither should the company, the corporation, pack unlimited stuff they have. So they either both got to go or they both should be there. Like, once you're allowing unlimited, kind of the Citizens United thing was just brought up, then I don't understand why a union can't do the same thing. I don't think either one should be able to do that. So no, I'm for this, but I'm also against the other one.
All right, looking forward, I want to talk a little bit more about the economy because I think it's so critical, not just for regular Americans and their pocketbooks, but also for what goes on in the presidential campaign and race. Rich, to you, as you look forward, how are people going to react to this increased pressure? We had been enjoying a really good stock market until late, and that can make you feel better about going to the polls. What do you think people's reaction will be as they get to November?
It's a mixed bag. I think some people are still suffering, but as Bill was pointing out, in the swing states, Minnesota, Virginia, Florida, we have lower unemployment than the rest of the country. So I think the president's got his work cut out for him, and he's just got to work hard for this.
Right, absolutely. And Bill Kristol, to you, we were talking about the possibility that there could be any kind of improvement in the economy as we approach November. I don't think anybody thinks the economy is going to get better, or jobs for that matter. We assume this will rebound well to Romney, will it?
Yeah, look, I think President Obama is vulnerable because his economic policies haven't worked as well as he hoped they would and as he said they would. So that gives Governor Romney a real chance to win. I'd even make him a slight favorite to win. But I do think he needs a forward-looking agenda that tells people what he would do. And I think he has to put in a bigger context. Why didn't Obama's policies work? Well, because they were based on a certain model that that Governor Romney thinks and I think is wrong. And he's got to explain what a pro-growth agenda that he would push through Congress would look like. So I think voters want a sense of going forward of what I think President Obama, incidentally, I would say give the same advice to him, not that he's asked me, but, you know, he needs to give people a sense, not just that he struggled hard in his first term against a recalcitrant Republican Congress and he inherited a terrible situation from President Bush. I don't think he's done a very good job, honestly, and I know some Democrats agree with this, in laying out what would he do in his second term. Let's say he won a big victory. Let's say they took back the House of Representatives. What's his agenda? So I think both of them actually could do more to lay out a forward-looking agenda and give the public a choice.
Right, exactly, instead of looking backwards. Jonas, what do you say? What do you think people want to hear, and especially investors?
What they want to hear? You know, there's a bull market in pessimism among investors and voters.
Oh, yeah.
If you look at any data point over 4 years, it's a lot better, other than home prices, which are lower. But basically everything else is improved. However, people are very scared. They think that like the next shoe is going to drop any minute. Whenever you talk to an investor, they don't want to take a lot of risk. They think there's going to be this other Lehman event. And they've been thinking this way for several years now. It's why there's so much fascination with like hoarding gold bars and stuff. And it shouldn't be there. If you look at the market over the last 4 years, it's really not a bad period. This president has been sitting over one of the highest returning stock markets in history, and yet you wouldn't think it. Investors don't feel it. They don't want to be in. They keep pulling money out of U.S. stocks, out of equity funds, and going into no-yielding money market funds and low-yielding bond funds. So they're waiting for something to happen that's probably not going to happen.
Interesting stuff. All right, Bill, Rich, and Jonas, thank you so much. Enjoyed speaking with all of you. Now we want to know what you think about this. Here's our question tonight. Should union dues be allowed